Ever since he first appeared in the 1965 film Gamera the Giant Monster, this flying turtle has carved a fan base out for him alongside the likes of other kaiju, such as Godzilla and Ghidorah. He is hailed as the guardian of the universe, and he often helped humanity defeat extraterrestrial monsters. In his current story arcs, Gamera is seen as a full-fledged hero on Earth, but he was initially introduced as an aggressive beast who destroyed everything in his path. Over time, he has evolved into a heroic defender, and today we shall look at the origins and story arcs and tell you all about this giant turtle, Gamera. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Tracing the origins of Gamera. First introduced during the Showa era, Gamera belonged to an ancient species of turtles that relied on flames, electricity, or light to gain energy. Like most kaiju, Gamera was in a dormant state for the longest period of time until an accidental atomic blast in the Arctic woke him up. In the 1956 film, it was stated that Gamera had been sighted before, and there were some photographs of him flying before his first on-screen appearance. It was said that he lived on the lost continent of Atlantis, but his origins are shrouded in mystery, at least in the Showa era. There was no explanation behind his mutation or his ability to breathe flames, and we also don't know how or why he fed on flames or radioactive materials for energy. Gamera's origins were further explored in the US version of this film, titled Gamera the Invincible, where he was introduced as a silicon or metallic-based life form. He was the sole survivor from an era where most monsters did not need oxygen and instead relied on other chemical compounds found in natural gas or petroleum to survive. This provided some explanation for his tendency to feed on fire and his ability to survive in a vacuum such as space. Finally, the Heisei trilogy put forth a straightforward origin story in Gamera, the Guardian of the Universe, where he was introduced as a bioengineered hero designated to protect Earth. Created by the lost civilization of Atlantis in the hopes that he would defeat Giaos and prevent the destruction of humanity, Gamera had been bound within a rock over several hundred years. In the present, this rock was floating in the Pacific, and it consisted of a giant monolith that describes the kaiju's history. While researchers looked into the rock, they found a bunch of magatama, which enabled them to form a psychic link with Gamera. Over the trilogy, the researchers uncover several Gamera skeletons in an undersea graveyard, which suggests that the Atlanteans had created beta versions of the kaiju before finalizing a prototype. A scene from Gamera 3, Revenge of the Iris, also links the kaiju to Asian folklore, wherein a giant tortoise is said to be the guardian of the North in an old tale. Once again, a reboot film titled Gamera the Brave had a new spin on his powers, and the movie began with Gamera sacrificing his life to get rid of a bunch of Giaos. Several decades passed, and a young boy stumbled across a glowy red rock with a tiny egg on top of it. As the egg hatched into a baby turtle, it struggled with its fiery breath and flying abilities until it fed on the blazing hot rock and reached maturity. The marvelous saga of Gamera. Gamera's story began all the way back in 1965, when he first appeared in his Showa-era debut, Gamera the Giant Monster. The movie starts with Gamera emerging from the depths of the Arctic after a dogfight between foreign planes leads to a nuclear explosion. While Gamera has been dormant for many years, he finally broke free and destroyed a research ship before making his way to Japan. This film was an attempt to capitalize on Godzilla's success by launching other kaiju monsters, but Gamera eventually became a brand of his own. As the movie progressed, the Japanese military forces tried to use dynamite to blow him up, but Gamera retaliated by spewing fire and moving around in a spinning motion to dodge any weapons being directed at him. Eventually, the JSDF took a drastic step after Gamera destroyed the city of Tokyo and trapped him in a rocket before sending him off to Mars. While the residents were relieved to have gotten rid of Gamera once and for all, it did not take him long to make an appearance again after the rocket carrying him was struck by a meteor. In Gamera vs. Barugan, Gamera lands in Japan after the meteor crash and destroys Kurobe Dam before flying away to Osaka. In the meantime, a thief mistakes an egg for an opal, which eventually hatches into a giant lizard called Barugan. As Barugan grows stronger with extended exposure to light, he ends up attacking Osaka, where Gamera faces him and manages to defeat him. Much to the JSDF's relief, Gamera proves to be of great help when he drowns Barugan in the depths of the ocean before flying away into nothingness. As the Showa era continued, Gamera reappeared in Gamera vs. Gyaos, where he feeds on the flames caused by a volcanic eruption and eventually faces the winged kaiju named Gyaos. Gyaos is often considered Gamera's archenemy, and the two have had multiple face-offs across their story arc. In this film, Gamera defeats Gyaos by dropping him off into the crater of an active volcano and once again protecting Japan from a grave threat. As his story continued, Gamera faced an alien species known as the Virians, who had traveled to Earth in the hopes of conquering Earth. However, things took a turn when they mind-controlled Gamera with the help of a device and compelled him to attack Japan. As the story progresses, two children help Gamera break free from their control, while the Virians unite to form a giant squid named Virus. During the climax, Virus manages to stab Gamera in the stomach, but the flying turtle eventually defeats him by dropping him off in the ocean. Gamera's next appearance was in Gamera vs. Giron, where he traveled to an alien planet called Terra and faced their guardian monster, Giron. While Giron roughed him up pretty badly, Gamera gathered enough strength to overthrow him eventually before returning to Earth. The next couple of movies followed Gamera as he fought against a female monster named Jiger, as well as a fish-shaped alien, Zigra. As the Showa era came to an end with Gamera Super Monster, a young boy came across a pet turtle and raised him until he grew into Gamera and escaped into the ocean, while the captain of the Xenon spaceship attempted to invade Earth with the help of monsters such as Gyaos, Zigra, Virus, Barugan, and Jiger. The flying turtle had to step up his game and defeat every last one of them. Sadly, Gamera Super Monster did not have the impact that the creators hoped for, and the entire series was put on hiatus until Shusuke Kaneko ushered in the Heisei era in 1995. He created a reboot version of the original Gamera film, wherein Gamera is trapped within a floating atoll in the waters surrounding Japan. As the government officials explore the atoll, Gamera breaks free and flies away to Fukuoka, where the JSDF forces have successfully captured two Gyaos. When one of the Gyaos tried to escape, Gamera attempted to kill him and followed him all the way from Fukuoka Dome to the Japanese countryside. While the locals had faith in Gamera, the JSDF viewed him as a bigger threat and directed their resources towards bringing him down. As the movie approaches its climax, Gamera not only defeats the Gyaos, but also faces the JSDF and dodges their attacks. Eventually, Gamera managed to defeat every last Gyaos before making his way to the Super Gyaos nest in Tokyo, destroying it to ensure that they don't return to Japan again. While the Super Gyaos almost manages to escape, Gamera shoots him down with a plasma blast and incinerates him before returning to the sea. After the success of this reboot, Gamera 2, Attack of Legion, covered Gamera's life 1 year after his victory against the Gyaos. This film introduced an alien species known as the Symbiotic Legion, who arrived on Earth with the intention of growing a plant capable of annihilating everything in its surroundings. They intended to launch this plant's seed into space to cause more damage, while Gamera arrived at the scene and faced their leader, the Mother Legion. Gamera even managed to destroy the plant, but Mother Legion planted a new flower while the JSDF scrambled to evacuate the population. While Gamera faced Mother Legion, he looked out for his human counterpart, Asaji Kusanagi, and the two were finally successful in defeating Legion with the help of the ultimate Mana Blast. This attack was powerful enough to vaporize the Mother Legion, and the JSDF finally started appreciating Gamera for everything he had done to defend humanity. While Gamera managed to shake off his reputation as a danger to humanity, the next film, Gamera 3: Revenge of Iris, once again painted him as a threat. After Gamera accidentally triggered the hatching of countless Gyaos eggs on Earth, he took it upon himself to travel and destroy every last one of them. He ended up causing large-scale damage to civilization in the process, and the JSDF unanimously decided to find him and kill him. Meanwhile, a young girl named Ayana Hirasaki discovered a strange creature and decided to use it to avenge her parents' death. She blamed Gamera for killing them, and she then ordered Iris to kill Gamera while the Japanese military forces also arrived at the scene to get rid of the flying turtle. All hell broke loose when all these forces clashed against each other, and Iris eventually ended up hurting Ayana. Thankfully, Gamera uses his mana manipulation abilities to get rid of Iris and also save Ayana's life, who realizes that Gamera's heart is in the right place. As the movie wraps up, Ayana begs for Gamera's forgiveness while he prepares to destroy an incoming swarm of Hyper Gyaos and emerges as a hero at the end of the day. In 1973, Gamera appeared in Gamera the Brave, where he first helped a Japanese village deal with the threat of Gyaos. He ended up sacrificing himself to destroy the Gyaos, and over the years, the citizens forgot all about his sacrifice and lived in peace without any more looming monster threats. Nearly 3 decades later, a boy named Toru stumbled across a turtle egg on a glowing red rock, and this turtle eventually hatched and fed on the rock, triggering a transformation into Gamera. Toru named him Toto and struggled to deal with him as his fire-breathing abilities became increasingly stronger. Toto helped the local village deal with the threat of a gigantic sea lizard called Zetus, and he eventually came under the JSDF's radar. As the film progressed, Toto was all set to sacrifice himself just like his ancestor, but the young boy convinced him against doing so. Finally, Toto managed to defeat Zetus with the help of a fireball attack, but the encounter drained him of his strength, and he fell to the ground out of exhaustion. As the JSDF forces surrounded him, Toto decided to fly away, even if it meant being apart from Toru, who tearfully bid him goodbye. While this movie marked the unofficial end of the Heisei era, a 2015 short named Gamera is also considered to be part of this era. The movie follows Gamera as he faces a bunch of Gyaos in the past decade before returning to Tokyo to fight an unnamed tentacled monster. Recently, Gamera appeared in the 2023 Netflix series Gamera Rebirth, where he must face monsters such as Zigra, Jiger, and Gyaos. Gamera's arsenal, exploring the mighty powers and abilities. Much like Godzilla, Gamera is famously known for his fire-breathing abilities that have bested the likes of Barugon and Iris. He mainly stands out due to his ability to feed on heat sources and channel the absorbed energy into streams of flames, known as a flame jet. While the Showa version of Godzilla could only do this when he was stuck in a dangerous situation, the Heisei iteration could spit plasma fireballs with great precision and take his opponents down with just a single shot. Depending on the element that he absorbs, Gamera can produce a wide variety of fireballs, such as oxygen-powered plasma shot or even a mana-powered shot that derives power from Earth's literal essence. Sometimes, he produced an organic shot of pure plasma so potent that it once blasted Gamera's arm off. Strangely enough, Gamera could grow his arm back in a plasma form, which suggested that he could manipulate fire to some extent. Gamera also had some built-in weapons in the form of his elbow spikes and thick carapace, and most missiles and weapons would bounce off his hard shell. His shell did get injured on some occasions, but it was mostly invulnerable to the Gyao's supersonic scalpel, Zigra's paralyzing beam, and Barugon's rainbow death ray. While his outer shell could withstand extremely powerful blows, his inner shell was quite soft and had been injured to the point of bleeding on numerous occasions. However, Gamera's bodily tissues were quite dense, and most conventional weapons could barely dent his tough exterior. His elbow spikes were mostly hidden and would only poke out in a fight in his initial Heisei-era appearances, but they became a part of his permanent image over time. Gamera could also enter a coma-like state in the face of imminent danger, which would trick his opponent into thinking that he had already died and leave him alone. This would give him enough time to heal and lure his opponents into a false sense of security before pouncing on them. Gamera had a peculiar way of flying, wherein he retraces his limbs, head, and tail into his shell and spins around like a frisbee. This technique is known as the spinning jet, as the sharp edges of his shell would act as a chainsaw and injure anybody who tried to approach him. On some occasions, he would only pull his legs and tail in his shell and fly through the sky while shooting flames from his tail, much like a jet. In the Heisei era, Gamera would flap around his arms and legs like flippers for additional aerodynamics and control while flying. Exploring the body mechanisms of Gamera. In the Showa era, Gamera had quite an exciting physiology, consisting of special organs tailored to digest oil, coal, fire, and other elements. He had an oil bag to store oil and other liquids, while substances such as coal were stored in a coal sack before being sent to the melting furnaces. His digestive system was certainly no joke, and coal, fire, magma, and uranium were sent from the storage stacks to a melting furnace within his body so that they could be burned. After being burned thoroughly, these materials were converted to thermal energy in his intestines. To keep up with such heavy processes, Gamera's heart was made of thermal energy and had extraordinary power compared to a human heart. Gamera's muscles had also evolved to withstand the high temperatures generated by the metals in his body and could produce about 10,000 times more force than a human muscle. Since he was a turtle, he had a tough exterior shell that was practically invulnerable, and only a few opponents had the strength to break through his carapace. He also had electric spikes on his tough shell and poisonous claws that added a layer of external protection. As Gamera's character evolved through the ages, the Heisei iteration had unique bodily mechanisms that differed from his Showa counterpart. To begin with, he had a weaker shell that had been damaged on numerous occasions by the JSDF's missiles and Legion. However, Gamera made up for the weak shell with his superior ability to regenerate cells and heal from injuries at a supersonic speed. He boasted of chromosomal manipulation and could tweak his genetic structure to adapt to his environment. He further possessed superhuman strength as well as high levels of intelligence. This iteration of Gamera had an advanced semicircular canal that could withstand his rapid spinning, and his eyes and brain remained unaffected by his rotation techniques. He was a telepathic being who could mentally communicate with people, and even sense Asagi Kunasagi's spirit with the help of some ancient spirits. Lastly, the Heisei Gamera's blood could absorb heat, fire, high-voltage electric currents, and nuclear fuel that could be converted into plasma energy and stored within his bodily electrons, protons, and atomic nuclei until he wishes to release it. Comparative might, where Gamera stands among monsterverse's legendary titans. To begin with, Gamera's strength is often compared to Godzilla's, and fans would love to see them appear on screen together. While Gamera has fire-breathing abilities and an enhanced physiological system that allows him to digest fire and electricity, Godzilla easily surpasses him in terms of brute strength and power. The two might be a good match for each other, but Gamera might lack in some places, such as an origins story or character development arc. Both Gamera and Godzilla start out as misunderstood monsters, but Godzilla has had an extensive story arc that spans decades and provides an enriching collection of stories that display his growth. While some fans believe that the Showa-era Godzilla might overpower the Showa-era Gamera, there is some debate about their Heisei-era counterparts, where Gamera might be able to overpower Godzilla to some extent. As compared to Godzilla, Gamera might not be that big of a household name, and he was also released an entire decade after Godzilla first came out, which made it seem like he was a turtle variation of the kaiju, whose films mostly catered to a young audience. Moving on, let us look at how well Gamera might fare against the mighty King Kong, also known as the eighth wonder of the world. King Kong, the gorilla-like titan, is known for his strength, intelligence, and durability, among other things, and he seems pretty capable of outwitting Gamera. Besides having a high intellect that enables him to think on his feet and make strategies to escape his opponents, Kong is also known for carrying around a giant axe that is sharp enough for him to hurt even Godzilla. There's no doubt that Kong might be able to defeat Gamera with his sword, but otherwise, the flying turtle would have posed a huge challenge for the gorilla. To begin with, Gamera was at least about 262 feet tall with a huge carapace and enhanced bodily strength, which would have given him the upper hand in a fight against Kong. He also had the ability to shoot plasma balls from his mouth, and these balls were about 2,000 to 3,000 Fahrenheit in temperature, which could potentially burn through Kong's body. However, one must note that Kong stands 335 feet tall and is notably smarter and quicker than Gamera, making it quite possible for him to defeat Gamera if he puts his mind to it. Mind-blowing appearance of Gamera in other forms of media. Besides appearing in movies and video games, Gamera's character was a part of books such as Gamera the Brave and Yokai Hyaku Monogatari, which includes several crossovers between franchises. Gamera's adventures were also recorded in a few comic series, such as Gamera the Giant Monster and Gamera vs. Barugan. First published in 1995, Gamera the Giant Monster focused on the kaiju as he fought against a curation of monsters in a baseball stadium, before being sent back in time to defeat an evil kaiju. While the Gamera vs. Barugan manga served as a retelling of the film in the Heisei era, another comic named Gamera 2006 Hard Link focused on his battle against a group of Gyaos. In 1996, Dark Horse Comics published an extremely popular 4-part miniseries focusing on the kaiju's encounters with a Gyaos, an alien fish named Zigra, and an alien monster called Virus. The future of Gamera in the Godzilla universe. In relation to other kaiju in the monsterverse, Gamera is a promising character with much in common with Godzilla among other monsters. The two shared the same reptilian physique and fire-breathing abilities, and conveniently, Gamera fits perfectly into the monsterverse lore. The monsterverse is filled with ancient civilizations and underwater cities, which are settings where Gamera would easily blend in if only a few efforts were made to connect his origins to the pre-existing lore. There are numerous scenarios where Gamera could be introduced in story arcs focusing on Kong and Godzilla, wherein this flying turtle appears as a middle ground between the two and bridges their differences. Gamera's origins are also tied to the Native Americans, who worship him and believe that he was involved in the creation of the Earth. By this logic, we could introduce Gamera as a mythical entity that either has cordial ties with Godzilla or views him as an enemy. While there are no concrete plans to produce a Gamera crossover with the monsterverse, it is certainly quite feasible, and we will just have to keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Marvelous verdict. To wrap things up, Gamera is one of the most interesting monsters in the Godzilla universe, and he has certainly come a long way since his first appearance in 1965. Besides his majestic appearance and fire-breathing abilities, this flying turtle has won over the audience's hearts with his personality as he progressed from being a violent monster to a hero on Earth. He has certainly made his mark as one of the most popular kaiju depicted in fiction, and we can't wait to see what is set in store for him in the future. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe.